Welcome to another jam-packed day full of interviews and games from PAX Unplugged 2024. This batch of interviews kept our minds swimming with the predominance of TTRPGs, but we had a few card and board games mixed in to keep it spicy.
Hi everyone, I'm Nick Francia. I'm the creative director of Gehenna Gaming. Our big thing is our first fully published system, Eldritch Automata. It's an action horror, mech horror game, also mixed with a little bit of relationship building though.
Oh, thank you. So how does the relationship building work as like an aspect?
So the one thing that we wanted to do was really kind of marry mechanics and roleplay together. I play with a lot of role players, but I also play with a lot of role players. And it's kind of hard to really get them in on the set, sometimes on the downtime sessions and narrative more parts, and then vice versa. So what the relationship mechanics do is that as you build these things called strands with your fellow PCs, NPCs, enemies, lovers, rivals, both positive and negative relationships, they actually translate to mechanical buffs that you can give to your dice rolls later on.
Okay.
And so that does, it's going to reward those role players that take the time to have a scene with character versus the people that, they might need to be enticed into trying to get a mechanical benefit by engaging with the scene instead of just sitting back and being like, when's my next fight?
Right. I kind of appreciate that a little more because I role play a lot and do like voices and everything, and sometimes it's a little frustrating when your players kind of treat them like I'm just looking for the one question I have to ask you to get the next piece of the puzzle to go fight somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it kind of adds more three-dimensional aspect to the game. Can you explain a little more about like the other part that you said before the relationship?
Oh yeah. So the game really is kind of based into that downtime and then your action time, which are like your combat missions. So the automata are these giant 80-meter tall war machines. Your pilots are not heroes. You are weapons that have been repurposed by the military complex. And the game is pretty anti-militarism when you get back into it. It's kind of a deconstruction of that traditional mecha. The touchstone for it has been like Evangelion. That was our biggest inspiration.
I was about to ask if it was Evangelion.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with that. That's one of my favorite series, and it's also one of the first series I saw where I really sat down after I consumed it all and thought, what is this really about? And tried to take it more at face value. So we try to translate that well. Sometimes it's a little bit pretentious, but sometimes we hope the message comes across.
Yeah. But that sounds really interesting to me. I personally am not like a huge mech person.
Yeah.
But when it has these different, more like diverse like aspects like that, where you can add like the more personal aspects and like I don't know, more stuff like that.
Yeah.
How exactly do the mechanic like work? Or do you like fight within the mech or outside of the mech, or like how does that kind of play in?
So you fight in the mech for the majority of it, and that's kind of where like our power fantasy comes in against the horror. But you do have rules for fighting outside your automata as well, and that's definitely more of a survival horror like slant to it.
Right.
One of the big kind of principles we had was I didn't want there to be different rules for fighting outside your mech versus fighting inside. So it's all pretty seamless. You use the same stats across the board. It's just the enemies themselves have different variants. So you have an enemy that might be a certain difficulty fighting inside your mech is a different difficulty fighting outside your mech.
Yeah.
So, and usually what that means is the enemies are a lot harder outside the mech.
Right. So it's more scary survivalist, like you said.
But I mean, like horrors aren't the only things that you fight. As we all know, infighting within the human race is pretty common, and a lot of that is how we deal with like kind of, it's not super rooted into hard sci-fi, it's more like post-apocalyptic. So what happens when the world has been torn asunder? Can we bring those connections back together? And there are some people that they don't want to have that, and they want to take advantage, and unfortunately, like sometimes words doesn't really cut it, and that's when we break out into violence.
Right. Like, so the stats you're saying are like kind of the same? It's like, are there like mech upgrades, or like how does the mech level up, or do you level up, or are those like just
we have
one
a
of the
little
same?
bit of a robust like experience system. I always tell people, if you want a game where you're like picking every part of your mech, that's not Eldritch Automata. There are some amazing games like Lancer and Beam Saber that'll let you do that. But really what we want to focus on is the actual experience of piloting. So your mech archetype is actually decided by talents.
Okay.
And you do have customizations in terms of like you can build your weapon. But in terms of leveling up, it's really like, okay, I want to increase this stat, or I want to buy this talent. It's not a like kind of D&D level progression where like we're very like, this is what you get at this level, this is what you get. It's mainly point buy, and you kind of upgrade as you're kind of going through.
Yeah. What sort of like plot themes would you say are in, or are there like more than one?
I would say so. The big thing definitely cosmic horror, psychological horror, but also I think there is a little bit about, we have a lot of drama in the game. A lot about hope. Hope is a huge theme about, when hope dies or when hope persists. There's a whole mechanic that you can eventually unlock. Every character has what's called a hope talent, and that's basically a one-time use talent that lets you kind of take control of the spotlight. It lets you kind of rewrite the story in your own way, and every prompt begins with when hope lives, and then the effect activates.
No, I'm really interested. My husband really likes Evangelion,
awesome.
So I'm sure he'll want to talk about it when he can hear us, because he can't hear us over there. But I'm assuming Hedron works well with the system?
Yes. So we actually have our quick launch on Hedron. That's one of the many virtual tabletops we're bringing it to. Hedron, Alchemy, Dice Weaver have been our three kind of partners going forward. I'm sure they'll show up on Foundry and Roll20 eventually. But what's been nice about working with these other kind of virtual tabletop platforms, it lets us have a more personal relationship and really kind of curate an awesome experience, rather than just a simple port over.
Right. Well, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for giving me the time.